Hello, friends. Today I want to talk about the oppositions of decans. Now, you may say to yourself, what are the oppositions of decans? And bear with me while I try to sort this out and see if I can get my slides to work, which maybe I can't. Okay, apparently I can't. So we'll change this. Here we go. Here's the wheel, right? We've got Aries, we've got Taurus, we've got Gemini, we've got Cancer, we have Leo. At the ascendant, we have Virgo, and then Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius at the Imam Kali, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. So far, so good. Aries is March, June is mostly Cancer, late June into July is Cancer, late July into early August is Leo, and so on around the course of the year until we get to late February and early March, and that's Pisces. Well, we've got 36 decans all the way around. And if we track which decans oppose one another, we notice that in two cases, the moon opposes the sun. So we've got two specialty full moons that we should be paying attention to every year. And those are the full moon near the end of Cancer and the sun in late Capricorn. And that's the difference between Hecate, that's Cancer 3, versus Tolma. Now, you might say, what's the difference here? Well, Hecate, remember, is secret rituals at midnight at the three-way crossroads. It is private magic done in secret, whereas Tolma is considered to be public daring. Tolma is the quality that you want to have in your city's public officials. It's the people who realize that they have roughly 30 to 40% of the information that they need to make an effective decision, and then they go ahead and make it. They don't wait to have 75% of the decision-making information. They go with the information that they have, and they don't dilly-dally. They institute the policy changes that need to be made. So Hecate is private and secret, and that's associated with the moon. And Tolma is public and in full view of everybody, and it is associated with the sun. We've got this similar pathway between Taurus 2 and Scorpio 2, right? Taurus 2 is the ore or horary, the seasons or the hours, versus Leto. Now, Leto is the goddess that is the mother of Apollo and Artemis, the sun and the moon. And this is, there are natural cycles and natural rhythms. And then there is conscious, deliberate instruction. And that's the Leto side of it. So plants, animals, these things grow in their natural seasons. But if you want to raise up the young properly, those are not about natural seasons. That is about teaching them to do the right thing year in, year out, month in, month out, day in, day out, hour in, hour out. One thing is allowed to happen naturally, and one thing has to be very deliberately controlled, and you have to do it consciously all the time. So those are the kinds of oppositions that we're talking about in today's video. Well, what happens when we look at the other things that the sun opposes? Because each of the 5 planets, or each of the 7 visible planets, has 5 positions in the decans, right? 6 times 5 is 30, and then Mars gets a little bit extra because Mars is always a little bit extra. Here we've got the second decan of Aries versus the second decan of Libra. And it's Persephone the understanding that all things will come to their natural and appointed end, versus kairos, the idea that there is a timeless quality to everything, that all of us are bound up both in mortality, that's the Persephone side, and also in kairos, the idea of eternity. And that's the opposition between Sun and Saturn. Praxidike versus Ananke. Praxidike is human justice, and particularly capital crimes, the things that mean that somebody is living outside of the norms of human society, versus Ananke, who is the power of necessity, the forces that even the gods must obey. Like, not just humans obey those forces, but even the gods must obey the forces of Ananke. So it's human law versus divine law, and that is the comparison between Gemini and Sagittarius 3. And then finally, we have Virgo and Pisces. Themis, again, human custom, not so much human law, versus Okeanos, the deep wildness of the most distant places where human beings are not welcome and where human rules and human social norms have a tendency to break down. So that's three things that Saturn opposes. What are the other two? Well, the other two are Venus. So there's age, that's Saturn, versus youth, that's Venus. There's the whole idea of age and cunning beats youth and vigor every time, right? This is the contrast here. And we have the litai, the prayers, that's the Saturn of Taurus 3, versus the kuretes of Scorpio 3. Now, I haven't written too much about the kuretes yet because Martiana only, who's sartrix.wordpress.com, I think, pointed this out in one of her articles only relatively recently to me. The list that we have of the ancient deities puts Kairos in the list twice, but Martiana pointed out that it's probably Kuros or Kuretes, who's associated with Adonis, but also with spirits of place, with genii loci, the spirits of locations, and particularly the masculine forces of places rather than the feminine forces of places, which are the nymphae. And so we have the litai, the human prayers, our sort of self-created divinities that ascend to the celestial realms, versus the gods themselves embedded in the mortal sphere. And then we have Leo 1 versus Aquarius 1, Hephaestus versus Dike, our natural inclination towards being makers of things and creators and builders, versus what is it fair and right and responsible to build. Then we have Venus in her other three axes opposing Jupiter. And it's interesting to see Venus opposing Jupiter because both of these things are benefic planets. But we still have to be aware that benefic planets are capable of opposing one another. You can be an awesome servant of the public, and you can be a generous noble, and you can be out there doing all sorts of good things for the community. And that's the Jupiter side of the equation. But that probably means that you're not spending a whole lot of time at home luxuriating in the bath and lying between linen sheets and having lots of sex. You can be a jovial beneficiary or a provider of beneficences to the world, or you can be Venusian, and one of them is intensely public, one of them has a tendency to be intensely private, and that's the distinction here. And here we've got Aries versus Nemesis, or Eros 3, Aries 3 Eros versus Libra 3 Nemesis. So what do you desire versus how do your desires get you into trouble? Right? That's the set of consequences at play here. Cancer 1 versus Capricorn 1, Nike versus Asclepios. We have victory on the battlefield followed by healing. in the United States, we can see this distinction operating between those who say that the US needs to have an incredibly strong military, but at the same time not wanting to spend money to maintain veterans better benefits at a high enough level to support all of the injuries that come home from American battlefields. Right? So that's the stress here between Cancer 1 and Capricorn 1. And then Virgo 2 versus Pisces 2 is the Moirai versus Dolos. The Moirai, remember, are the three fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, spinning the thread of life, placing it into the pattern of the tapestry of fate, and then Atropos cutting it with her scissors, versus Dolos, which is the power of trickery, is the power of falsehood, is the power of believing that something is fated and discovering that no, in fact, you've simply fallen into error about where your free will is and where your fate is. And that's the contrast between the middle of Virgo, which is highly analytical and very careful and very precise, versus Pisces, which is very wishy-washy and fluid, and things are constantly swimming around in the water. Big picture Jupiter contrasts and opposes detail-oriented Mercury. And here we've got Tethys in Gemini 1. Tethys is the wife of Okeanos. So it's the waters and going with the flow and allowing for fluid movement and transformation, versus the Loimos, who are the diseases. And that's both the diseases like COVID, and it's the diseases like depression or anxiety or worry or various kinds of deep distress, being overly embedded in the anxiety problems of daily life and daily living. So it's just being in the flow and just being able to move from task 1 to task 2 to task 3 to task 4 without any problem, versus, oh my God, I have to worry about task 1 and task 2 and task 3 and task 4 all at the same time. Leo 2 versus Aquarius 2, Isis versus Phobos. Isis is the confident magician who sees that Ra is hoarding all of the power for himself, steps in, gives him a temporary disease, says only I can cure it, but in exchange you have to give me your secret name that allows me to have power over you. And Ra falls right into that trap. Whereas Phobos, who is the son of Aries and Venus and the power of fear, is very much the paranoiac who says, I'm not going to tell you anything about me. I'm not going to reveal what my symptoms are. My goal is to cause as much chaos, panic, and disorder here as I possibly can. And again, this is the big picture of Jupiter versus the little picture or the detail-oriented Mercury. Mercury, of course, has got to oppose not just one planet, but two. So the place where those three come in is Taurus 1 up here in the upper right versus Scorpio 1, and it's Charis versus the Nymphae. Now, Charis is the Charities. She's the eldest sister of the Charities. And so she's grace. She is human politeness and human niceties and humane behavior and taking baths and keeping your hair clean and washing your clothes and sort of managing your life. And then the Nymphae are the feminine companions to the Curetes or the Kuroi, right? This is that energy of I am doing what is natural to me. I am behaving in the way that is natural and feminine. So it's the springs, it's the groves, it is the natural landscape and the natural beings. And these are, in Greek mythology, the spirits that teach us all of the arts that don't specifically fall under Hephaestus's control. It's spinning and weaving and knitting and crochet and lace making and anything at all that arises as a result of the behavior of natural forces that has some sort of a feminine ring to it. This comes out of Mercury. But it's Mercury opposing Mars. We then have Cancer versus Capricorn too, right? Hercules, super strong and, with it and powerful and intelligent and able to overcome any obstacle, versus Hygeia or Hygeia or hygiene, good health. Health is only possible by nurturing others. It's not the rugged individualist, it's taking care of the community. Virgo 3 versus Pisces 3, this is Hestia, management of the household and care of the hearth and providing good food and quality shelter, versus Elpis and Maya. Now, Elpis is hope. It's the force that Pandora keeps hidden in her jar, and Maya is memory. So it's both looking into the future as well as being able to draw on the past, while Hestia maintains the present. So the fire has to be tended today, now, immediately. And Elpis Maya is saying, reach into the future about what it is that you want, reach into the past about what you remember, and pull them forward as sustenance for today. Hestia is preparing the food that is going to be eaten today. Elpis Maya is the force that says, memorize this poem, put away these pickles for the future so that you can eat them in the winter, right? Always we've got pairings that are suggestive of forceful contrasts between opposing forces, and they're not always the expected ones. Finally, Mars opposes the moon. We've got Aries 1 versus Libra 1. This is Idonius versus the Erinyes or Furies. Idonius is Hades, but he's also the beautiful one. There's some question about whether Idonius is also Adonis. Like, they're different names, but there's an interesting parallel here. And of course, Venus and Adonis in some versions of Greek myths are a very close parallel with the stories of Inanna and Dumuzi, that Inanna is so mad at Dumuzi for letting her go into Eresh Kigal's realm in the underworld and dying there, that she comes back up and she gives Dumuzi, her boyfriend, to the dark powers under the earth, and then he has to eternally die and live and come back to life again. So Idonius is the idea that we age, that we die, that we should live for this life and not worry so much about what happens to us after death. Whereas the Erinyes or the Furies or the kindly ones or the Eumenides are the sisters that are responsible for punishing us in the afterlife, and sometimes even come after us in this life. So it's the idea that you should do exactly what you want during life because you only get one of them, versus there are some behaviors that are simply out of bounds because you will get punished for them in the afterlife. There's a weird contrast between here, right? Between do anything that you want in life because you only get one, versus there is something after death and you can be punished in the realm after death for the stuff that you do in life. So watch your behavior and engage in ethical and responsible behavior. And that's this weird contrast here, right? And that totally fits in with the idea of Mars versus the moon, right? Mars says, go out there, get the girl, get what you want out of life, and, fuck it. And the moon says, no. our psychic senses tell us that there's life after death of some kind, and you can be punished for your behaviors there for what you do here in this life. Gemini 2 versus Sagittarius 2 is the same kind of relationship. It's Cybele or Cybele versus Chore. Cybele is the foreign or alien mother goddess who's brought into the Greco-Roman world from what is now modern-day Turkey. Chore is the name of the nameless daughter of Demeter, who goes into the underworld, right? Chore, the maiden, is just the girl. She comes back as Persephone. So we have the mother goddess who comes from outside of the known or civilized world, that's Cybele, versus the daughter who willingly sacrifices herself for the sake of the community. So we have the foreign mother and the native daughter in relationship to one another here and in opposition to one another. The foreign mother comes into the Roman world, the Greco-Roman world, as the saving force that allows the Roman Empire to ally with all of its surrounding communities and defeat the Carthaginians. Chore is the daughter, the native daughter, who goes willingly into the realm of Hades in order that the world may flourish. So it's the idea that some children have to go off into the wider world and make connections with the mysterious powers beyond, and also sometimes that mysterious powers from beyond have to come into our life in order to safeguard it from existential danger, right? There's the contrast. Leo 3 versus Aquarius 3. This is Serapis versus Osiris. Serapis is this god of abundance in this life. He's the one who makes sure that there's enough grain that's grown in Egypt that it can supply the bread dole in Rome. I sort of think of him as this god of abundance in this life. And, you know, he makes sure that there's bread on the table and that there's money in the bank account and wealth and prosperity in this life. And Osiris is the power that watches over the wealth and prosperity of the next life. So what are you saving for this realm and what are you saving for the next realm? That's the contrast here between Mars and in Leo and the moon in Aquarius. So those are what I think of as the oppositions. And you can build this into your practice as an astrologer and make this part of your overall practice, that if somebody has a planet on one side of this balance beam on any of these axes, that it tells you something about where the weight of their life is. They're being advised to pay more attention to one thing rather than another thing. They're being advised to pay more attention to one aspect of their life and less to another. If there are planets on both ends of a specific axis, particularly if one of them is in a decan that it rules, that puts even more weight on one side, but it also can suggest, if they're just random planets, that the balance beam is trying to figure out where the balance is and not able to find perfect equilibrium where both sides remain steady. But becoming familiar with these and having some of the tools and methodologies and language around these and being able to call that up is another great way of reading the charts that you look at for your clients or your friends. I hope this was helpful, and I want to thank my supporters on Patreon at the $3 and $5 tier for giving me encouragement to continue making these videos on a regular basis. Have a great day. Bye.